welcome to this series. We're doing on market shaping with MedAccess. And Achim, we'll just start with where you are and what you do. You work for BASF, the large international chemical company, started in Germany. You're based in Germany. And you work for the global health parts of this large business-to-business chemical plant. One doesn't normally associate BASF as having a global health program. So tell us, what is it you do there?
Yeah, indeed. Actually, this goes back into the early 2000s, where BASF started to work in the area of global public health. And it's originated actually from the fact that we have an insecticide portfolio which work very well on controlling vectors, which carry diseases like malaria. And it was originally, especially in the case of the mosquito nets, a joint venture between another division which works with chemicals in textiles. So it was a divisional joint venture between agricultural solution and textile to develop mosquito nets which are coated with insecticide. And with that, the overall journey in public health started.
So you started off with a company that produced lots of insecticides for agriculture and so on, and used some of that to help to control mosquitoes, which lead to malaria and other diseases as well. Yeah, fantastic. So you were doing that, and then you entered into a series of international partnerships, including with MedAccess and others. And one of the things we did together is we negotiated a volume guarantee together, which enabled you to bring some of these products out better. So tell us just the headline, top level, what did that volume guarantee mean for you? What significance did it have?
Back in 2019, the volume guarantee enabled BASF to move forward with Interceptor G2. As of today, I would say the volume guarantee is the reason why we have this technology in the market. Yesterday I was looking at numbers, and today 70% of mosquito nets which are delivered to Africa are based on this technology. And I'm absolutely convinced that without a volume guarantee, we would not have been able to see that in the public health space at all, this technology.
So this is 2019, and today, 2025, we have 70% of the nets are based on this technology. And back in 2019, it hadn't distributed at all yet. So you mentioned the Interceptor G2. Just tell us a bit about that. What is it? What's different about it?
Interceptor G2, the development started actually with the dialogue with the Gates Foundation, with other partners, based on the fact that there was resistance against the standard nets, which are on the chemistry of pyrethroids. And the mosquitoes over time became resistant to it. So there was a strong need, unmet need, to develop something which is still working also in the case of resistance against this chemistry. So together with the Gates Foundation, BASF kicked off the development of a combination of chlorphenapure with pyrethroid and put that as a dual-eye active ingredient insecticide combination on a net. This is today called Interceptor G2.
Okay. So the distinctive thing is there's two insecticides together in the same net. And technically, is that difficult to do, to get two insecticides on the same net?
At first sight, we thought it would be just the same production step, but it's not. Actually, it's more complicated because the chemical properties of the chemistries are different. So you have to adapt your production process, definitely in speed, in temperature, in various parameters to cope with that. So actually, it adds cost to your production.
Mm-hmm. So we're in a place where the world is using these single insecticide bed nets. The mosquitoes are getting resistant to them, so they're no longer as effective. And with bed nets, one assumes that the net does most of the work, but actually, contrary to intuition, it's actually the insecticide that does a lot of the work because it kills the mosquitoes. The insecticide really matters, and we're having mosquitoes becoming resistant to them. And you develop a net that has two insecticides, so it can continue to be effective, even though these mosquitoes are evolving in their clever Darwinian way. And so you're there. Tell us what was your business position there back in 2018, 2019? You developed this net, and what were the challenges you were facing?
I think 2018 described pretty much as a perfect storm. So we had all ingredients. We had a market with a a multi-source offer, many competitors. We had a completely commoditized market. We had a standard technology, the peri-only nets, which did not work. And the pricing was basically at the level of the cost. Many competitors actually struggled to simply meet their production cost, and there was overcapacity. So when developing in that situation technology which is completely new also for the regulators, in this case, namely WHO, we were faced with the situation that there was no regulatory pathway yet available for this new technology, and we had to compete with a completely commoditized generic market, and therefore we were not sure what would be the time to market. We were not sure if the additional cost can be covered by value-based pricing. So basically, we had no business case. We had no green light for a business case because you don't know how long it will take you to go into the market. You don't know what will be the additional cost to fully regulate it under WHO. And you don't have clarity if your customers will actually pick it up at the pricing you need to cover your cost.
And I think at this point, if I'm right, there was also a challenge about what kind of evidence in terms of the studies for saving lives, how effective the nets were. Tell us a bit about that.
The peri-based standard technologies, which were at that time in the market, were tested with a well-established methodology called cone testing and mortality, were due to the nature of this chemistry quite obvious because there is a knockdown effect. Now we came with a new technology, the chlorphenapyr, which is a physiological insecticide. It has to be first metabolized in the insect, in the mosquito, and then acts and kills the mosquito, but only after some time. So basically we were facing the situation that we could not show in the beginning that our technology is from a epidemiological effect more effective than the standard. So WHO came back and other scientists came back to us, or authorities, to ask for additional studies to show the value for public health. Mm-hmm. Those studies were called RCTs, randomized cluster trials, and they're basically done in the communities. They are meant to prove the epidemiological effectiveness against malaria. And they're super expensive. And we had to do those in 2 countries. And the price tag behind those studies were actually prohibitive for the business case when you put it together with the fact that we didn't know when we actually finally would be able to launch it.
So the market is lots and lots of pretty inexpensive nets produced by a number of suppliers. The very low margins in those nets. You have this new product that you think is more effective, doing some trials to prove that it's more effective, but those trials are not yet in. And then what happened? What's next? How did you get to the way forward?
Yeah, in the dialogue with our partners at the Gates Foundation, IVCC,
what's that IVCC is?
IVC is the Innovative Vector Control Consortium. And with them, we basically developed a project to run those RCTs and get also financing from the Gates Foundation. This was absolutely crucial to have a strong partner alongside our project to show also BASF internally that there is a path forward, that we have a plan, that there is also a very high likelihood that we will get those trials well set up over time. And once they are conclusive, there is also a good chance to get the recommendation from WHO because we have strong partners.
So strong support from the Gates Foundation and the Innovative Vector Control Consortium. We could have specialists in doing this kind of work, catalyzing new products into market. And at the same time, you're talking to the big buyers like the President's Malaria Initiative in the US and the Global Fund about will they buy these nets? Yeah. And they're giving you some positive signals, as I understand, that they would, but no certainty.
They definitely were interested in the technology. There was a clear need identified because of this resistance in the marketplace. So they were facing that their own tools, which they procure, did not work anymore. So it's public money and you invest it in something which doesn't do the job. But on the other side, the BASF new technology, Interceptor G2, was not yet fully recommended from WHO because the EPI trials were missing or these RCTs were missing. And of course, they gave us an interim recommendation because we had this first component in the alpha-cypermethrin, which is a pyrethroid. So based on that, we were able to enter the market in theory, but at the pricing level of the standard technology, which were below our cost. So from that perspective, there was on one side a willingness from our customers to start with the technology, but we were not able to offer it at the pricing they were able to afford. And that was, we were basically stuck in this situation. There was a need for the technology, there was a willingness to move forward, but simply the circumstances were against it.
So from a business perspective, you don't know how much of this you can sell. You have approval to sell it on the basis of the pyrethroid approval. And it's more expensive than the existing nets. So you don't have any clear visibility of what the demand might be. And you've challenged of the price is higher than the existing nets and feeling that the market's not going to buy it at that higher price. So then, as I recall, you started talking with the Gates Foundation and MedAccess about a possible volume guarantee.
Exactly.
As well as the same time talking to the Global Fund and Unitate about possible support for subsidizing the nets. So there's that possible subsidy portion and a volume guarantee portion. So sticking with the volume guarantee, what was that like? What did you see? What was the deal about? What did it deliver for you?
I think it changed the whole project from a purely static perspective into much more dynamic. We had suddenly a perspective over 4 years where we had a clear goal, clear objective to start with a lower volume and higher price, but then ramp up volume with a good rolling forecast, with a predictable timeline, and make the product available at the end of the volume guarantee for affordable prices and at a volume which generates sufficient economy of scale to give us also the ability to improve the cost situation on our side and offer at the very end a pricing level which is affordable for the community.
You had various things going on. You had the randomized controlled trials happening. You had support from the Gates Foundation, IPCC, then agreed this volume guarantee. All of those supported bringing the product to market. But in terms of the business case, you had to take back to your commercial teams. They say, look, this is worth doing. What was the case you made to them and how did that land?
With the volume guarantee, everything changed. Because the business case will, on the very end, be a decision at that moment, usually at BASF, based on a net present value, where you calculate the future cash flows discounted and look if there is a payback of your investment. You take a decision based on that. If you don't know when you start selling, whatever number you put in, you will never ever get approval because it's just so important factor when you actually start to have a first sale, that it would be prohibitive to go forward without knowing when you're in the market. With the volume guarantee, we were able to have a clear horizon for the project. We had a volume price curve, which enabled us to calculate the overall profitability of the project. And that actually triggered the full go, the green light to move forward. And it was approved basically as a complete project also into the future, not only stepwise. So the moment we are able to look into the volume guarantee, we took the decision to move forward till, basically approval by WHO.
So the volume guarantee helped to de-risk. So it gave you certainty about future sales at a certain level or future income anyway that made it possible commercially. And then what did that allow you to do? I mean, what actions did you take to start to bring down the price and to move forward with larger volumes. What did you actually do in business and manufacturing terms after that?
I mean, absolutely. When you have this outlook, this perspective of going over 4 years with a well-balanced volume price curve, you can make investments. You can talk to your contract manufacturers, your partners. You have a clear vision what will happen in terms of volume and can make investment in improvements in the production. You can streamline your supply situation of the chemicals. You can make also adjustment in the capacity to generate economy of scale, and all that happened in parallel because we had a clear perspective into the future that motivated not only the BASF team but also the partners we have in production.
And at this point, we're still in a place where pretty confident that this combination of pyrethroid and chlorphenapyr insecticides, that it kills more mosquitoes because they're two different methods getting at them. But still not sure if it was saving more lives at that point. And yet, as a company, you're willing to commit to bringing it to market without the certainty of the controlled trials. And then how did the partnership work? Was it a success from your own?
Absolutely, 100%. Also the operational part after the signature of the volume guarantee, I would call it, that's the strategic part, that you come together with partners and you say, we want to facilitate, enable the introduction of innovation, but then you still have to implement, and implementation is the harder part. It's like climbing down a mountain, and usually there the accidents happen. So the summit was the signature of the volume guarantee. The way down is really the implementation. And yeah, guess what? The COVID-19 pandemic came in the way. And nevertheless, we managed to outperform our own volume planning every single year. So we delivered every single year more nets into the countries with the partnership of the New Nets project, where the Global Fund was clearly one of the leaders and supporters. The Gates Foundations give us a hand with the communication, with the advocacy. We maintain contact with MedAccess. All that came together as a real good team. And last but not least, we established with that over the years a very good basis of trust. And that is also reflected in our initiative. During the volume guarantee, we started to look into the next generation net already. So we started a kind of co-creation workshop series with partners like MedAccess, the Gates Foundation, Global Fund, PMI, to ask the question, what will be the next generation net in 10 years? And all that came also from the confidence we gained with the volume guarantee that investing in public health is the right thing to do. It generates value for society. It generates, also a more sustainable and stable society in the countries. And last but not least, we work in agriculture. We know that there are very good side effects from public health interventions on farming, less lost harvest days, you have more school days. So all these things on the long run will help our business, will help to make a difference as BASF.
You're implementing these nets are going out in larger and larger volumes. You start off with lower volumes the first year and then ramp up the volumes and get it up. But meanwhile, the randomized control trials were completed and they came in. And what did they show?
Yeah, that was, I have to confess, actually also surprise in a positive sense. We have today evidence and we have trials over 3 years where malaria cases were decreased up to 50% versus the standard technologies. So that was much more than we expected. I think the minimum improvement was 15% better performance, and we did it with 50. And maybe just to put it in a less scientific perspective, a story which I like to tell, we have from each production batch usually some samples in our lab, which we keep for quality management reasons. And so we pile that up in our lab, and after a few months, we say, okay, we don't have to store them anymore, and we give them to NGOs for free. So in the case, maybe 3 years ago, we gave it to a church in Uganda, and we shipped it there, maybe 1,000 nets or something like that. And then 2 years later, we got a letter back from the priest of this church, and he said, well, since we have those nets, he hasn't lost any kid. So no kid died anymore. This was not compared to other nets. It was just a statement he perceived. And it's much more tangible for the team, and we identify with this technology because we get this kind of feedback. Of course, the data matter. It's important to take a decision for our procurement departments of our customer. They look into that, and they want, of course, to have the best technology for their investment. It's public money. There's a big responsibility. You have to make a decision what you would buy for that public money. And of course, you have data over 3 years, which decreases malaria cases by 50%. That's absolutely convincing.
I think in the Tanzania case study, it was the randomized controlled trial. It showed up average 44%.
44%, yeah. Benin, like 60%, yeah.
So there was 2 trials, Tanzania, Benin, and they both were very, very positive, much more positive in terms of the effectiveness of this net. So these nets have taken off. As you said, there's now 70% is supplied. Looking back on this partnership, which is now finished, is there anything you would have done differently? Is anything, any mistakes we made, anything we could have done a better job?
For sure, we have done mistakes. I think we should have listened much more to our customers. What are the needs they really have? It took me some time to understand that the main objective for the Gates Foundation, for MedAccess, for the Global Fund was to exit the volume guarantee with a price which is at a level which embraces the idea of charitable margins, affordable technology, affordable innovation. And of course, we are driven by KPIs, key performance indicators in BASF, the business case. We want to optimize everything in the light of our public health mission, of course. It's not a pure business, it's also a mission. But I think my mistake was clearly that it took me some time to understand that the exit price is key, that we have to move out of the volume guarantee with a price which is sustainable for the community, which is affordable, which has a win-win. I would even say win-win-win, because we have to include the communities in Africa who get a good technology. That was really the case. Today, we have achieved that. But me personally, I would say it took me too long took me quite some time to understand that
the volume guarantee, looking for these charitable margins and prices which work in this market, because the market's unable to absorb the much higher prices effectively. That's a long-term game. It's not just the duration of the volume guarantee. And now we're in a situation where you came in, BASF came in as the sole innovator bringing this product to market. We're now in a place in which there's several other companies who produce nets that are kind of similar in design, and you're in competition with them. And what's that like?
Yeah, well, in the first place, I have to say it felt challenging when we are facing in March 2023 the moment when we finally got the full recommendation of WHO, and 3 days later the next second-in-class recommendation were published from the first competitor copying, or let's say having the same technology in the marketplace. But I think we have to also embrace that idea, because it is a marketplace, when I look into public health, which has to have also the idea, the philosophy of being a mission. So having multiple suppliers is also a need for our customers to mitigate the risk of supply. So put all coins on BASF, I understand, is not possible. Of course, on the other side, we have also to ask ourselves, what is a healthy supplier? If you immediately enter from, let's say, a healthy situation into a hyper competition where price is the only thing what matters, then it's also a self-destroying scenario for us, because you would basically end up in a moment when you make no more margin at all. And our philosophy in BASF is clearly that we reinvest the small margin, the charitable margin, in new R&D. And I just mentioned that we have started R&D projects to develop new mosquito nets even before we have launched Interceptor G2. to already look what will be needed in 10 years. And that consumes quite a couple of million US$ every year as a whole team working in it. And of course, we have partners such as the mentioned IVCCs working with us again. So there's a long-term perspective. And we have also to internally consider that there are reviews of our business every year. We have to explain what we do. We have to justify the investments. We have to justify our activities. Mm-hmm. But of course, with strong partners, it's easier. And the volume guarantee, clearly, and I have to repeat that, has not only the fact that we have the technology today available, it also changes the attitude, I think, of innovator like BASF to see the long-term perspective that innovation can be done. And it for sure also triggered a higher appetite to work in that space and to innovate. So today we have a public health unit in BASF, which is very robust, very safe in terms of getting investment, getting resources, having a long-term perspective, license to operate. And that's really thanks to the good partnership we had with MedAccess, with the Gates Foundation, with the other partners. That was really, really important for us.
That's a really interesting insight. And I wouldn't have picked it up being outside the company. So we knew we're kind of partnering with you to help you deliver these nets at larger volume and lower prices and getting it out and testing them. I had not appreciated that the volume guarantee would play a role in helping to sustain an onward chain of innovation and to make it possible for the company. So the company now, you're committed to this innovation, but in addition to that, you're looking at generating manufacturing in Africa, based in Africa. And what is that about? How is that part of the mission?
Yeah, I think we can't stop innovating just on the product basis. We looked in many areas of sustainability. 5 years ago, we started a circular economy project to collect old nets and put them into recycling process. Customers who actually recycle, BASF customers who do recycle plastic into new products such as construction material, etc. And that can fuel the whole ecosystem of public health by generating wealth in the communities. Because just to give you a flavor, 1 ton of shredded mosquito nets, old mosquito nets, have a street value of more than $100. And there is a market for it. So we made this reverse logistics happen. We explained, we connected the dots, and we facilitated that. That's one part. But then also we want to produce in Africa the nets. There are some challenges. There is no textile industry such as we have it in Asia available. Therefore, we also want to innovate in the area of business model. We are working with partners in Africa where we want to transfer the complete technology. So not only the chemistry itself, so we want to also teach and develop the full system with the binder technology, with the final product to be in the hand of a local manufacturer who is then, I would call him a friendly competitor, doing its own African net in Africa, and we would license that technology out to the partner. The advantage of that is it's more financial business case decision to some extent that we look into capturing value more from the innovation part of the chemistry than from the final net. We leave the final net to the local partner and try to innovate and to capture the value from the chemistry part that enables us to make still a business case, but generate affordable prices ex-African country.
So you mentioned a version of this. You mentioned that the company is producing what you called charitable margins. How are those perceived within the BASF hierarchy? I mean, is this charity? Is it business? Is it somewhere in between?
It's a very narrow ridge we have to walk on. Clearly, we want to have a long-term perspective with public health, and you need that. You need endurance. You need a strategy. We have to look into the next 10, 15 years. So our investments are meant to fulfill unmet needs in the future, and therefore we need resources. We take our insecticide pipeline and look into what can be repurposed for public health use. But also we look into the library of BASF, what molecules have been maybe not used for agriculture, but could be used in public health. So we have different approaches. But yes, you're right. Our objective is to keep that at a level of charitable margins, we call that. And that means we are, in fact, subsidized somehow by BASF, by the core business, by agricultural solution, because margin levels are higher in the division. So we are flying well below. And we have to bring, let's say, the value not only in the term of the business, but also the value for society. And I personally believe it actually does much, much more than just the reputational capital generation. It does also attract young talents, for instance. I'm in contact with many interviewing processes where people actively ask, we saw on the internet you do something in public health. That's the reason why I work for BASF and I want to work for BASF. So attracting young talents from the university, from the labor market, public health is also a trigger. And that's a good investment in future, I would say.
So that's the overall business case altogether. Yeah. Achim, is there anything else that you'd like, any observations or reflections about this process? And anything else you'd like to share before we close?
I think something what I suggest for the future, the next innovation, the next new intervention might require a volume guarantee. It will be necessary to customize it, depending very much where this is situated. If it's something which is already available, which is maybe improvement, then it might not need the same magnitude of a volume guarantee. It might be something which is more in the area of advocacy, of a better planning, of a, let's say, overall approach, more holistic approach. If it's something completely new, again, I give you an example, 2 new chemistries mixed together on a mosquito net, not yet available in the public health space, not available in agriculture, for instance. So something which would be completely new, it would be quite difficult, I think, to go through the regulatory pathway at WHO because it's completely new. So it would be pioneering with a new net into the space of public health. Here, I think we would have to tailor-made a kind of support, maybe a volume guarantee, maybe something different, but BASF alone would be quite challenging to do it.
That's a terrific insight. I think the core point being there are times when business alone cannot do this.
Absolutely.
You need partners and support and advocacy.
Yeah,
that's great.
Absolutely.
Achim, tell me about your own personal experience of being involved in this global health venture. What does it mean to you?
It definitely gives my job a purpose. And it goes back into 2007 when we launched the first generation of insecticide-treated nets, Interceptor, in the Amazon, actually, in Brazil. I lived in South America at that time and had a chance to travel to one of those remote villages where we distributed the nets together with the health organization of the Brazilian government. And we stayed there 2 weeks in the small village. And what I learned there is actually the alphabetization rate was very, very low because kids could not attend school. They were sick at home, malaria. And we distributed nets, cases went down, but the contact remained. So over the social media, I remained in contact with the health workers. And what tell me today that alphabetization rate went up. So I believe that the mosquito nets were part of the story that a whole generation had access to better education. I think that gives my work a certain purpose. And I'm proud of that we can make a difference and that motivates. That is actually the reason why we go the extra mile.
That's a great story. So you're in the Amazon working on other BASF products.
Yep.
And discovered that these nets not only save lives and reduce disease, but kids get literacy and education as a side effect.
Makes a big difference for the old generation. I mean, today they're all adults, and maybe those nets brought them into university because they learned to read and write.
When you came into BASF, did you think you might do this kind of work? Were you motivated by that? Or were you?
I think yes, because I started in Bolivia back in 1997. That sounds quite a long time ago. And I worked a lot with subsistence agriculture. So smallholders, farmers who work with their potato growing in the Bolivian Andes. And I saw how crucial it is to give them a hand, to support them with technology. And I remember one moment at 4,000 meters talking to a potato farmer, and he said to actually buy the seed potatoes, he takes a credit, a loan, putting his house and his field as a guarantee. So I knew at that moment, if I do a bad job recommending the wrong technology, he might lose everything. And doing a good job might really help him to have a better life. So that was triggering, I think, my motivation to go in this area and do something which has clearly a meaning to me. And it makes sense. It's logic.
That's great.
And combining business with something meaningful, which you generate value for making this world a little bit better, that's not wrong, I think.
Achim, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us on this volume guarantee, and thank you for the partnership these 2 years.
Pleasure.
We really appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you.